966.
Yes, one big thing. Beginning January 1, 2022, the UAE will shift its official weekend for government employees to Saturday and Sunday. Since Friday is the Muslim day of worship, work on Friday will end by noon, with sermons and prayers beginning at 1:15. So not only is the weekend shifted, but the work week is shortened to 4.5 days for Emiratis employed by the government. Now, it should be noted that private companies will be free to choose their own working week, so that's to follow or not to follow. The UAE said the move would ensure smooth financial trade and economic transactions with countries that follow a Saturday-Sunday weekend, facilitating stronger international business links and opportunities for UAE-based and multinational firms. Last month, the UAE also approved sweeping legal reforms, including new commercial law amendments aimed at increasing foreign direct investment. The UAE had already liberalized laws regarding cohabitation before marriage, alcohol, and personal status laws, and introduced longer-term visas to lure businesses and talent. It is worth noting that in 2006, the UAE was the first GCC state to shift the traditional Thursday-Friday weekend to the current, for the rest of the GCC, Friday-Saturday weekend. Saudi Arabia followed suit in 2013, and then the rest of the Gulf did as well. We may touch on this in the discussion that ensues today on investment, but this UAE weekend shift is especially interesting in the light of the budding battle for business between Saudi Arabia and the UAE in terms of attracting global corporations, skilled expatriates, and foreign direct investment.
The alliterative budding battle for business.
Battle for business, yes.
It should also be noted, and I thought that was really interesting that they are the first country in the world to make Friday a half day. So they are the first country in the world to have a 4.5 day work week, which is really interesting.
And so here we have really progressive labor regulations coming out of the Gulf. Cut or take note.
I'm color me shocked that the first nation in the world to shorten their week is not Spain or France, where the work ethic is a little bit lighter and there's a little bit of booze at lunch, which is common. So,
well, the UAE is very good at making the most of publicity and PR, and the Gulf region in particular, they love to be the first to do anything. So I think the announcement of moving the weekend is big news, but then shortening the week was also a good way to generate some buzz and some press. But as far as I'm concerned, I really try to separate this news into two categories. One category is the hard economic calculation that, as Richard referred to, the UAE is trying to do whatever it can to stay a couple of steps ahead of its regional competitors. And one way to do that in the economic realm is to move the work week or move the weekend to better align with global business standards. I think the 4.5 work day, shortening the work day to improve well-being and all that, I do attribute a lot of that to PR and publicity fluff a little bit. As we just mentioned, the private sector is probably not going to cut down the work week. They'll probably still be working 5 days. And I've already been hearing from a few contacts that this shift in this policy change is going to create some disruptions on the home front too. Will schools follow suit? How are all of the various parts of your day, if you're a business person, your kids go to school, everything has to fall in line. So it's a step forward, but also in some spheres, it's going to be a disruption as well.
This is a regular theme with this 966 in that the Saudis, who in the past have not been particularly adept at PR and have actually shied away from it. And when they weighed in, it could be sometimes disastrous, have now become masters of the glitz big announcement. And I chuckled in your piece, that we're going to get to, where one of the things you said, the constant barrage of new economic announcements. And as Lucian will attest, I went full grump on Oxygen actually in a recent podcast, because they got enough on their plate. They have enormous things ongoing, but every other day, it seems, there's this major announcement. So yes, a lot of what we do here, what we try and do here, and usually with Saudi, but in this case UAE, is unpack what it really means. Mm-hmm. And so that's what your point is spot on. What does this really mean? We don't know.
How long? What's the money line on how long it takes Saudi to follow suit on this, if at all?
A lot longer. And you know, and Robert, you can weigh in, but I mean, in 06 they went the first shift, and then in 2013. But we have to remember, the Emirates is 80% expat. Saudi Arabia is 30 in the 30 range, and you have so this is extremely disruptive, and you know, moving the day of worship for the seat of the holy sites is an entirely different proposition, a much more conservative society, as obviously much smaller expat community. So it's much more problematic, I think.
I'd agree with Richard. On that. I mean, my sense is that the Saudis will look for some other area to make gains in terms of making their commercial environment and business environment more attractive to foreign investors and global business people. The demographics are a big hurdle there in making those types of shifts. But at the same time, we have seen a lot of this tit for tat economic policy announcements over the past several months. I mean, the legal reforms and social reforms coming out of the UAE, a lot of those have been mirrored pretty quickly in Saudi Arabia. The pathway to citizenship that was announced initially in the UAE, it took a few months, but we saw, I believe, November, Saudi Arabia coming around and doing that as well. So I wouldn't say they're far behind necessarily, but it's just a question of what race do they want to be in? Do they want to just be mirroring these policies, or do they want to look to another area where they might be able to exploit their comparative advantage a little bit in a little bit of a better sense?
Yeah, it's been an interesting, there's a little bit of, even a short time that it's happened, a little bit of evolution in the sense that, so when Saudis, for example, changed their rules about how they're going to tax goods coming out of Emirati free zones, and when the Saudis said, you know, you need to have your headquarters here if you're doing business with government by January 2024, a lot of people said, okay, this is a zero-sum game, here come the Saudis. But I think as people get into it, say, actually, this could be good for the region. And you, just as you said, you know, part of what I talked about was the significant legal reforms that UAE has put in. That those are much more likely to move along. Not obviously cohabitation or marriage or alcohol soon, but you know, those in terms of the regulatory environment will come around to Saudi Arabia, and you sort of have this dynamic where UAE has the history, the environment, and the regulatory and legal framework that's very attractive. Saudi Arabia has the market. It's good for the Gulf if Saudi Arabia can catch up with the UAE a bit on its legal and regulatory environment. You know, it's not necessarily a zero-sum game, in my opinion.